Hello, Smart Money Tree podcast listeners. Welcome to this week's show. My name is Kirk Chisholm, and I'll be your host. So today I'm joined with Beau Henderson. How you doing today, Beau?
Good. How's it going, Kirk?
Doing well, doing well. Glad to have you in the show. This is a great topic to be talking about. So, Beau, tell before we dive in, Beau, tell us a bit about your background, how you got started in the Social Security field.
Yes, 25 years working around retirement planning. And one of the things I was actually meeting with a mentor friend of mine about 12 years ago, and over dinner, he shared with me, Beau, I did something frustrating to me. I did something that hurt my wife. I was like, I don't know if I want to get into this conversation, but what he was talking about was when he was 66 for retirement age, he called Social Security asking about taking his benefit. I understand that I can take my benefit at full retirement age and still earn as much money as I want to. He was still earning, making a lot of money. And he said he asked the Social Security representative, should I take it? He said the response was, I don't know why you wouldn't. So he did. Fast forward to 72 years old, he sold his business, and his frustration was their household was in the situation for him to delay his benefit to 70. He was just paying tax on additional income they really didn't need. And the problem with the advice he got from I don't see why you wouldn't take it, there wasn't complete context to the household situation. Now, if you step back, he already had some hereditary health issues going on. His wife was several years younger. So that decision at 66 years old, looking back now at 72, he realized when he passes away, his wife will inherit $1,600 a month less Social Security benefit for the rest of her life. And statistically, with the life expectancies in that situation, it would be over $200,000 of household benefit that now their other assets have to support for the rest of her life. So, on my way home from that meeting, I realized there's a big disconnect. This is a really smart guy, Kirk. He loved his family. And I said, if he's getting it wrong, I have a feeling a lot of people are getting it wrong. And I started doing research, and the reality is only around 4% of people are claiming a decision that would give them as much as they could receive over their life expectancy. So big disconnect. And that started me down the trail of, I think with better information, people can be equipped to make a better decision. Taught over 200 classes at this point. I've just released a second book and just realized there's just not a good, easy resource to get good information on how to do this benefit. Yet it impacts most households. And for most, it's their biggest source, if not one of their biggest sources of income in retirement.
So, why do you think Social Security is so confusing for people? Because in some ways it's very simple, in some ways it's extremely complicated. So, why do you think that?
The disconnect that I was starting to become aware of something's going on here. The first thing, it's a government system. And like many government systems, it's overly complicated. There's over 500 potential combinations of how to claim your benefit in a household. But it seems simple, right? 62 for retirement age 70. And where most people are getting their ideas, doing what we're wired to do as humans, we're asking for social proof from people we know, neighbors, coworkers, brother-in-laws, what they did, and that's completely out of context. And a lot of times leads to a really quick decision that if we spend a little more time with, we'd get more money from the benefit. So one, it's overly complicated system. Two, part of the disconnect that the resource you would hope that would be very helpful, which is Social Security Administration, they're not equipped to help you and really not legally allowed to help you nail your benefit and give you advice on how to take that because they don't have context of your other assets, your goals, your income gaps, and the things that really need to be considered when making this decision. And then one third thing, and it kind of throws my industry under the bus here, being a financial planner. Most financial planners aren't addressing maximizing or optimizing this benefit. And unfortunately, I find that it's either they're not trained or not in a system that trains them on how to do that. So if I don't know, I can't help. And or um, there might be some a little bit more of a negative reason that there's just not a good compensation structure to be given Social Security advice, so it doesn't happen. Yet it's one of the most important decisions from an income perspective and money lasting for people's lives that people are going to make.
Yeah, I appreciate that perspective. I think our industry doesn't always do a good job at aligning. Um, it doesn't. They don't align benefit with help, and it's why people without a lot of assets don't typically get the best quality advisors because they're not
Right.
compensated for that. Um, However, I do find that Social Security is one of those weird things where, I didn't realize there's over 500 combinations. I'm curious how you came to that number because I'm, I'm not. I mean, some other people I know that do Social Security, even they say like they don't have all the answers. It's such a convoluted web of stuff, and to get answers from the Social Security Administration is that in itself is a problem. And if they're not able to give you advice, then where do you get it? So, how do you understand this complex government web um, of rules and regulations, and to in order to determine what's best?
Yeah, the I think what happens is it's oversimplified, and it's no big deal. It's not that big of a difference if I take it at 62 versus 65 versus full retirement age versus 70. But the data shows us that the average household is leaving is $230,000 was the last data I saw on the table from their claiming decision. So it's a big decision. It's a big deal, and it's like a lot of things. There's a process to do better, to get closer to that 4% in this country that are kind of nailing the decision. And I break it down into three steps. If we'll do these things and spend the time to do these things, you will get more money from this benefit. The first, and I know advisors and the person planning starts resonating with this, is just organizing and clarifying the puzzle pieces of your financial life. Right. And that's my goal usually is to get it on one page. What's the different tax classifications? What are the pensions that are coming down the pipe if there are? Just organizing and clarifying. For a lot of people, that's very helpful just to really see what's going on and what's in play here, because then we can start modeling different scenarios. The second step is once we have a little bit of organization of what we have to work with, because this is really income planning, right? Is then we know it's know the rules that apply to your household. And that's really when I wrote the book or when I teach a class, I try to break it up into different scenarios because you don't need to know the whole code, but you do need to be aware of the rules that apply to your household, right? If you're married, if you're a survivor, if you're divorced, if you're single, there's different things. And if you're responsible to know those rules, the important thing with that is there's certain things if you need to apply for a benefit or even change a benefit in the timeline that if you don't know to apply for it, you don't get a phone call, you don't get a letter saying, you get an extra $100,000 of benefit if you did this now. You're going to have to know to do that and apply for it, so you know the rules that apply to your household. And then the third, and this is new to a lot of people, it's model all the viable scenarios. What is the goal we're trying to accomplish? What is the income gap? What are the other income sources in the timeline? And let's model all the ways we could solve that using your Social Security or Social Securities for couples as tools to solve this problem we're trying to solve. And if we model scenario A versus B versus C, we're going to get a pretty mathematical clear path of what's going to give us a better result for what we're trying to solve. So that's really the process. Organize, clarify, know the rules that apply to your household, and then model scenarios. And what I find is this, that I think it's because people just don't realize how important this decision is. They just don't spend the time to go through or just don't know a process to go through to get to a better result.
Yeah, and there's no all people do is they get this sheet of paper and says, here are your benefits, here are the three benefits, choose one.
Right.
And it's confusing, and there's, like you said, there's a lot of other rules that are not clear to people. Um, what are some good rules of thumb people should be thinking about when they're looking at their Social Security?
I think, and this came up with the example of why I even started doing this. The mentor friend is one, especially in households with couples, is realize claiming the benefit, especially the larger benefit, it's not my benefit and your benefit. The larger benefit's going to be the benefit that survives both lives. Sometimes I find that a decision's made not really thinking through the impact of, well, somebody could carry that larger benefit another 10 years longer. And that's lifetime benefit from Social Security. And then you tie it in is that I think the other thing, Kirk, I would say is that Social Security is not this decision in a vacuum that when we get of the right age, we just need to make. Is really we can't have a good Social Security conversation without it integrating income planning. Which income sources am I distributing in the timeline and when? Do I need to be taking my pre-tax money first to delay social or vice versa? Do I have other sources of income? So income planning's tied in, and then really tax planning's tied in, right? Because if I can grow a lower tax cost of living adjusted source of income bigger by utilizing other sources of income in the timeline, that can have an impact of lifelong taxes I pay too. So all those things are really tied together. So it's really Social Security is not this one-off component that I need to check the box that I turned on. It's really part of an overall integration of all those things: income distribution planning, proactive tax planning, and optimizing Social Security for your goal. And the reason I say that is a lot of times you'll see Social Security conversations around how do I get the maximum dollar possible, and that might be the goal because everybody wants to get as much as they can from the benefit they paid into. But when I say optimize, I mean what is going to reach your goal the best? What's going to get you? Maybe it's worth taking it sooner to get out of work 2 years sooner. Right. But we need to model that, have that conversation. And then my goal is that people feel equipped, that they have better information to make a better decision when we go through these processes.
So how should people be, let's say somebody's currently working,
Mm-hmm,
they're 65, let's say they're 68, 69, whatever, they're still working.
mm-hmm.
Um, how should people be thinking about their Social Security benefits? Should they just wait until they stop working? But what if you hit 70 and you're still working? Like, how should people be thinking about that in general?
It really be the same process. If you're still working at 65, you really the earnings cap comes off at full retirement age, which right now is between 66 and 2 months and 67, depending on when somebody was born. So if you're going to turn it on and you're going to work, you typically are going to want to wait until your full retirement age, or they're going to withhold portions of your benefit. You're kind of shooting yourself in the foot in that situation. But what you can do, I talk about model. Sometimes people hear it too much. But if I'm working, then what I could do is if I know I'm thinking, say somebody comes to me, Beau, I'm thinking of retiring in 3, 4, or 5 years from now. Okay. If you know about what you're going to earn, we can also get the information to say, well, if you work 3 years, your benefit would increase to this, 4 years, this, 5 years, that. And that might be good information to know when you're trying to decide where in the timeline to take it or where in the timeline you might even want to retire.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So one question I get a lot is, well, what should I do? Are they going to cut Social Security? Should I take it now? There's this unknown out there of people who are worried they won't get Social Security, so they want to take it sooner. How should people be thinking about that looming overhang of whether the government's going to pay or cut it, or
Right. Since the 25 years I've been around retirement planning, Social Security has been a headline that it's not going to be here. It's long been it's kind of sexy, gets clicks, likes, views, listens. But when you look at the reality of how legislation happens, one, it happens slow. The last legislation that changed full retirement age from 65 to 67 took decades to actually start once it was passed. So what government does really well with benefits like this is they kick the can down the road. I completely expect for bands of people to be pushing Social Security full retirement age back, right? 67, 68, 69. But it's rare we're going to see a benefit that somebody's taking being taken away. Now, if we want to model a worst case scenario, you'll see the headline. It makes it sound like Social Security is going to be gone 2034, 2035. But the whole story is there's a working demographic that's still supporting 80% plus of the boomers benefit. Generation X, right? There's a gap in population there, but the millennials right behind that are actually a bigger working demographic than the baby boomers. So I expect you see people in retirement and then making the decision to be able to make decisions and plan based on the rules we have today. But knowing that over time it's going to change. So if I'm talking to your kids, I'm saying I don't know what it's going to be, but we need to build our own pensions because it's going to have to be different as we continue to go through the timeline. And one big thing I think with any kind of news, especially if it's one, knowing it is slow moving. Usually we have time to start preparing and planning and positioning. But two, anything's a rumor until we plan off of what's the legislation and the law, and it's a rumor until we have better information. Because I find a lot of times, Kurt, people make decisions based on emotions that are rumor of things that don't ever happen, right? So I think that if you wanted to be super safe, let's reduce the benefit by 20% to be funded by the current working population, and would you still make the same decision? Because it's still going to be an important decision to make.
Yeah. Um, so maybe you can describe how Social Security benefits are actually taxed right now.
Yep. The depending on so there's a couple of things, and the goal here, as we explain it, is not to calculate it, right? It's to know that you can go and calculate and net out or bring out the tax, bring out any Medicare that might be coming out, because it's great to see the number on your statement for benefit, but it's really the number we care about is the number that hits your checking account, right? That's what me and my family can use and spend. Um, there's a tax term, provisional income, and it's going to be made up of almost all sources of income you'd have in retirement. Right? It's going to be dividends, interest, distributions from retirement plans, pensions, wages, and really you're going to add all those up that you have coming in for the year, and then you're going to take one half of your Social Security benefit for the year. So my benefit's $24,000 for the year. I need to add $12,000 to that number. And then you apply that number to thresholds, and there's three bands, and the thresholds run that either none of your Social Security benefits taxed, 50%, one half of your benefits taxable at your tax rate, or the highest it can be taxed is 85% of your benefit taxed at your tax rate. And the idea is that let's go through the process and get the net number that we need to take out so that you know what you're actually going to have coming in versus more of a gross number. And one thing I can say with the tax, there is some proactive planning. If you do some work with Roth conversion strategy, meaning you find yourself in retirement with big buckets of pre-tax money, and we're over a 6 to 8 year period typically looking for opportunities within the thresholds and the brackets to convert monies to get a Roth bucket. So a lot of times we could, if we're very intentional, we could utilize some Roth distributions to come below those thresholds and pay less tax on your Social Security, right? But that's going to be a proactive year-to-year tax planning conversation to put yourself in the position to shift those assets.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. Um, so I know sometimes things can get a little complicated when people get divorced and remarried. How should people be thinking about that? Because I know I spoke to a client once and they're like, well, I got divorced, I remarried, like I don't want to disrupt, I don't want to take money from my ex, you know, and
Right.
it got all weird. So, how should people be thinking about that?
So divorce, remarried. So these we have a couple scenarios. So if you're divorced and you were married at least 10 years and you're currently single, meaning you could have been married 3 or 4 times, it doesn't matter, but you were married to somebody for 10 years and you're currently single, you would be entitled potentially to the equivalent of a spousal benefit if you're married, meaning if you had an ex-spouse that has a benefit more than twice your benefit. So I have a benefit of $800 a month. I have an ex-spouse that has a benefit of $2,500 a month. If I'm full retirement age and it's been at least 2 years since I've been divorced, I'd be entitled to half of the 2,500 or 1,250 a month, meaning getting a spousal boost on an ex-spouse. Okay. Works just like a spousal. The difference with a spousal is you're still married, and the higher earner would have to file their benefit for the lower earner to true up to the half of the benefit. A lot of times, people ask me, "Well, what if I don't know? What if we were divorced 15 years ago? I think there might be something there." If you will reach out and set an appointment with Social Security, they're going to ask you for some documentation, like a divorce decree. They will give you your ex's earnings history, and you can calculate if there's a benefit there. And a lot of times, I'll find somebody will find two, three, $400 extra a month by checking. So it's one thing you can do if that applies to you or someone you know is see if there's a benefit there. If you think there's potential that an ex-spouse, you can check those boxes, married 10 years, currently single, but that might have that benefit more than twice yours because you're entitled to it.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. All right. Um, so what else do you think we haven't covered, do you think is relevant here for the conversation that people need to know?
I think a real important conversation when I'm teaching a Social Security optimization class, one of the things that tends to be most impactful is a quick conversation around what happens when a spouse dies. Right. Sometimes, and it's my story. Really, my dad passed away at 49 years old. I was 23. I was helping my mom. My first interaction with Social Security was helping my mom get benefits for my 10-year-old minor sister at the time. So long background in history with Social Security benefits. But what happens when a spouse dies? And I think sometimes the biggest takeaway from my Social Security conversations is to ask a couple, what is your plan for when one of you dies? And Kirk, any guesses on what the answer I typically would get when you ask what's your plan for when one of you dies?
Nothing.
We haven't got around to it, haven't thought about it.
Yeah.
It's not, we're busy. We have careers, hobbies, kids, grandkids, all those things. And but it's really become something I'm passionate about because the older I get and the longer I do this work, the more calls I get from that surviving spouse. And not only did they just lose their person, now we have less options typically to solve things with if there wasn't a plan. Now, why I say it's worth having the conversation and leaving that surviving spouse, leaving each other with at least an idea of what to do, is across the board when a spouse dies, income in the household drops by right around a third. So you typically will have a significant drop of income. Okay, that's one thing. And I guess that surviving spouse, a lot of times the female, at least with less income, they're going to have less tax to worry about, right? That's my I'm messing with you tone, right? No, yeah, there's actually a thing called a widow penalty. Typically, there's a significant loss of income, and the tax burden actually increases, right? Because you go from the most favorable tax bracket, married joint, to single, the least favorable, and your standard deduction just got cut in half. So if we haven't thought about that and are aware of that, because again, that's not stuff we like to think about. We're busy with life. We got plenty of time. But if we haven't thought about that, there's a lot of surviving spouses that are left in a tough situation because the reality of what happens when a spouse dies. And then to bring it back to how that applies to Social Security, that's why taking the time to make a really good decision and making sure the lifetime benefit in a household um, reaches the goal or is going to extend for both lives is really important to think about. It's not just my benefit and your benefit. It's how do these two tools best prepare us for as long as we live. So I guess really, if I were to kind of follow that, it's just maybe a big action item from this whole conversation. When I say what's the plan for when one of you dies, and the normal answer, we haven't got around to it yet. Maybe that's an action item to take a minute and let's at least start having some conversations around it because I know when I run across those situations, the person that passed didn't intend to leave their surviving person in a bind, just didn't get around to it. So it's normal, but I think we can do better when we're aware of it. So that's why I spend some time on that, Kirk. It's just been a really important topic that comes up over and over again.
Great. Well, Bo, I really appreciate you kind of sharing your wisdom with us. This has been great. Where can people find more about you?
Yeah, I think richlifeadvisors.com is kind of where we do our content and teaching and a lot of the things that we're passionate about. But I think as it pertains to the conversation around Social Security, I did just release this 2025 edition of Social Security Clarity. And if you'd like to get a copy, go to socialsecurityclarity.com. What I'm really excited about there is it's updated for 2025, the Social Security Fairness Act, all the new thresholds. But once you have the book for the rest of your life, you'll get all the updates yearly that come out with Social Security to equip you with any information that might be relevant to the decisions you make. So again, one of the things, remember, we talked about the 3 steps to making a better Social Security decision: organizing, your puzzle pieces, your income assets, knowing the rules that apply to your household, and then modeling the scenarios. And that's really what Social Security Clarity, the book, takes you through that process and how to do that. So That would be my next step if you wanted to raise that foundational knowledge of being equipped to make a better decision with this very important benefit.
Awesome. Well, Beau, I really appreciate you sharing your wisdom with us. And I know Social Security will probably be changing the next year or two. They're talking about no longer taxing it, which would be great for a lot of people. We'll see what that happens. But yeah, thanks for joining us, and we'll have you back on the future.
Hey, Kirk, I appreciate it. You're right. Taxing Social Security, that's a whole nother show, but appreciate you having me.
Hey, Doug, did you hear? We're giving away free money. Well, I'll tell you about it in a minute, but before I do, there's a saying in the mining community, well, precious metals mining, that is. The saying is that if you want the best deals, you have to be in the room. Now, you're probably thinking, what does it mean to be in the room? Well, I'll tell you. Being in the room means that you're on the short list of people who get invited to be a part of the best deals. These are the deals that most investors will never have access to. You mean like IPOs? Nope, IPOs are chump change. Those are for retail investors, small potatoes. That's nothing compared to these deals. These deals would have you salivating to get access to them. Once you know they exist, you will never look at investing the same way again. I almost don't want to even tell you that they exist because it will ruin your thinking of how the investing world really works. Now, you might be excited that these deals exist, but you only have access to the deals if you're an insider, or in the room as they call it. Now, as loyal listeners to the show, I'm going to give you a chance to be in the room. Money Tree Investing Podcast has created the Insiders Club. This is a community of our show's members who are loyal listeners of the show and want to get more out of their investing experience. Being a part of the Insiders Club gives you insider status for upcoming events and webinars, discounts, free stuff and books, and influence on the future direction of the show. This is a great opportunity to join us as we expand our content and services. Oh, and did I mention free money? Yes, in the next few weeks, I'll be giving away free money to our members of the Insiders Club as my appreciation for listening to the show. Now, there's no cost to join the Insiders Club. Just go to moneytreepodcast.com/free money today to join the community. That's www.moneytreepodcast.com/free money. I hope to see you in the room. All right, that was a great interview with Beau. Really appreciate him coming on the show. Now we're into the panel portion of the show where we have our very own Barb Freeberg. Hey, Barb.
Hi, Kirk. Happy to be here.
Glad to have you. And we also have our very own Phil Weiss. Hey, Phil.
Hey Kirk, hey Barb, good to be here today.
Awesome. Well, let's just dive right in. So, Barb, what were some of your thoughts from the interview?
Social Security is such an important topic, and I was really shocked to hear the conversation that was on the interview about how someone was advised just take Social Security when you're still working, and he didn't have the knowledge or information to know that your benefit will actually rise if you delay up to age 70. Because for those people that can delay up to age 70, there might, and I highlight might, be reasons why that might be a good decision. So, loved opening the door to this topic.
Awesome. Phil, what were some of your thoughts?
I completely agree with Barb. This is such an important topic. And Barb, what you just said, I have clients that came to me from another advisor, and they told me that that advisor told them to start Social Security while he was still working, and they didn't wait till 70. And that has a huge impact when we get to their financial plan because their social, 'cause people don't realize how much your Social Security benefit grows while you wait. This is such an important topic. It's one I've written about in my blog many times because there's so many things to keep in mind, and it's individualized too. It varies from one person to another.
Well, and the other thing, obviously in life, there are plenty of unknowns, things we're never going to know when we die, et cetera, et cetera. But you have to, if you're ill and you know that you may have a shorter lifespan, well, then, yeah, probably a good idea to take Social Security earlier. But if you've got longevity in your family and you're in good health, the financial differences that it can make in your lifetime earnings from Social Security can be massive.
They can, and just because you're not in good health, if your spouse is in good health and they're younger than you still might want to delay. Because guess what happens when you're gone? Your spouse gets the higher of the two benefits. So it's not just an individual decision. Like when I say individual, I mean from household to household. But within a household, you have to take both members into account, not just one.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest challenges with Social Security is that it's more complex than it needs to be. If you're married, if you got divorced, if you got remarried, if you're widowed, if you got three legs, like there's so many different variations when it comes to Social Security that most people end up having to, if you have a plain vanilla relationship, right? You got married once, you're still married, they're both still living, plain vanilla, right? It's pretty straightforward. But if you have any sort of variance in your family, like probably at least half the population has this by now. Somehow, a third of the people, or maybe it's close to 50% of the people have been divorced, but I think it's probably the same 50 that get divorced multiple times. So I don't think it's actually 50%. But it raises complexity. And, the Social Security Administration is supposed to help you, but I know people that specializes and they don't know all of it. It's so down the rabbit hole complex that many times you actually have to call them and get an answer because it's really hard to tell otherwise. So um, I'm not surprised people are confused and overwhelmed with the Social Security conversation, but it is an important one. And so, Barb, what are some of the things that I know recently? I've gotten 5 calls this week alone from clients saying, "Should I take my Social Security now? Is it going to run out? Is Elon Musk going to drive away in his Tesla with my Social Security money? Like, what's going to happen to my Social Security? Should I take it right away?" Like, I'm getting legitimate calls from smart people who are freaked out about this. So, how should people be thinking about this?
Well, first of all, unless I am totally misinformed, there have been no policy decisions made regarding your Social Security benefit. Now, there have been discussions of firing people that are within the Social Security Administration, but that impacts the office and definitely will impact the service that you might be getting, which wasn't that great beforehand. So be aware of that. But we don't know what is going to happen. I believe it is very likely that those of us who are claiming now probably aren't going to have much disruption to our Social Security one way or the other. But I think for people that are, in their 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, there may be some adjustments. The full retirement age might be boosted. The benefit might be cut a bit. I don't know, and neither does anyone else. So my advice is use the information you have now because you don't know what's going to happen in the future. So use that for your planning today.
Great, Barb. Phil, what about you? Any different thoughts than that?
No, it's really hard. We don't know what's going to happen. So we have to go by what we know today. That's a really good point. We can't start to make decisions on speculation because they're likely to be wrong because things don't work out the way we think. Just like we can't forecast the stock market, we can't forecast what's going to happen with legislation either. And you have to make the decision based upon where you are now. I agree. I don't think that people that are already receiving benefits or that are close to receiving benefits are going to be impacted by change in a material way because those people, there's not a lot that they can do to change things. And if we think about what Social Security is for some people, it's like their main source of income. And it gives them whatever standard of living they get. And if we change that, we really impact people's lives in a big way. And while I know there's a lot of concern about what's going on, it's hard for me to imagine that they would do things that would impact those people. I do think it's quite possible that they raise the full retirement age at some point, but again, for people that are further away. I also think that the other thing that they could possibly do that Barb didn't mention is they could change the cap on what your earnings can be to to make payments into the system. Right now, it's like 160 something thousand. I don't remember the exact number off the top of my head, but it's 160 something thousand. There's been talk that they could suspend it at that same number, then reinstate it at 400, or they could just make it go up because Social Security is a very regressive tax. Because if you're under the limit, you pay that combined, if you're working for somebody, 7.51% between Social Security and Medicare, no matter what your salary is, if you're under. But as your salary goes up and up and up, if you get once you get over that ceiling or that cap, now your percentage that you're paying of your income is actually lower. So it's a very regressive tax. So they could easily raise that, doing that and increasing the retirement age. That could go a long way towards protecting the system. Could they cut benefits? Yes. I know they've talked about not taxing the benefit. That would have the opposite effect, right? There's a lot of different things that they can do, but it's hard for me to imagine that this is something that's so integral to so many people's lives in retirement that they could do a lot to damage it. And if they start to change it, it's got to be in people that are further away so they have time to adjust and compensate for any changes.
Yeah, I mean, those are great points. There's one thing you said, Phil, and I want to touch on something Barb said too. You said, Trump has basically said in his campaign that he was going to push not taxing Social Security, which I think, frankly, it used to be that way. And then I think it was Clinton Gore that instituted a tax on it. I could be mistaken, but it was somewhere around that time frame that they instituted a tax on Social Security. I don't think they should be taxing Social Security. I think it's kind of ridiculous, but I get it. I think it's a good idea to not tax it. But here's the funny thing. We naturally think that, like, well, if they don't tax it, we'll have less money in Social Security. But I'm not 100% sure that tax goes into Social Security.
Yeah.
That just goes in the general budget. So it's kind of like, as an example, so if the SEC sues a firm for doing something wrong, and they screw over a bunch of investors. People naturally think the investors get the money. They don't. The SEC gets the money, and the investors have to go do something else. It's a weird fact of government that you naturally think things piece together, but they don't. So anytime you see like drug seizures, it's not going to like who you think they're going to. It's going somewhere else. Anyway, I did want to pick up on one thing Barb said, which I think is really important. And this is something that hit me today because I had an earlier conversation with a client about this, which is, um, as Barb said, there's no talk about them cutting Social Security benefits. Social Security benefits. I have to say that twice, right? That's different from the Social Security administration. That's administrative costs, right? I read somewhere it's like a third of the money is paid out in administrative costs, some crazy number. I don't know if that's true. I could be way off, but just as a proportion, there's some proportion, could be 1%. I don't know what, it doesn't really matter. But some percentage of the government budget is paid to the Social Security Administration to run it, right? To hire these people that don't do a good job and confuse you and miss payments and miscalculations. By the way, if you haven't done this, look at your Social Security statement every once in a while, because frequently they'll like miss whole years. They'll just say zero. Like, well, I was actually working that year, but it says zero. Call them and get it fixed, right? You can do that, right? And make sure you do it because that's benefits you won't get. But the point being is you need to understand there's a difference between Social Security benefits, which you're entitled to, and Social Security Administration, which is how they're running the program. So if they cut all the administrative costs, you're still entitled to your benefits. Those are two different topics. And I'm not saying one's right or wrong. This is not politics. I'm just saying you have to delineate that in your mind because most people on TV lump them together and they make you make your own conclusion, which, it's a bad conclusion. So, um, but anyway, so I like what Barb and Phil said here because there's one key point in that before Trump was elected and before Biden was elected and before Obama was elected, Social Security was going to run out of funds in early to mid 30s. This has been there for a long time. No one has changed this in a while. I think W had some small change under him, I believe it was, where they extended the date they extended the retirement age. I could be wrong. I thought it was W, but it might have been it might have been Clinton. But somebody extended the retirement age from whatever it was till whatever it is now. And then I believe what happened was is anybody within a 7-year period of retirement was not affected. So I believe it was 50, if you were 55 and older, the changes didn't impact you. But if you were 55 and under, you were impacted by the changes. So my point is that while we worry about, oh my God, they're going to dock my benefits this year, and oh my God, I'm SOL, what am I going to ever do? Maybe I should take my benefits now. Well, the problem is, first of all, if they ever came out and said that, you just sign up today, right? Why preempt what you're guessing? Because Phil says we're not good at guessing, right? We're not good at predicting the future. Why not don't preempt it, wait until something happens and then do it, right? Or at least a discussion. There's not even a discussion going on, not with the president, not with Congress. It's not even being discussed, it being cut. So the most prudent, logical thing to do, even though it's freaking people out, and I understand, right? It's freaking people out, is just wait. Just be patient. Wait until something starts to happen, and then you make your decision. But don't guess, because we're all bad at guessing what's going to happen because we don't know. Probabilistically, I don't think anything's going to happen. Certainly not in the next 12 months, but who the hell knows? I think probabilistically nothing's going to happen. But if it does, then you've got time to think and decide, right? And I know this is stressful for people, so I'm trying to be mindful of that. But if you think of it logically, you don't need to make a decision right away. Just wait until you have more information. It's kind of like the Roth conversion. We have to get down this rabbit hole, but Roth conversions, they get everybody whipped up. Oh, it's tax free. There's no benefit. It's, I don't know. We don't have to go down that rabbit hole, maybe not. But I don't know. What are your thoughts, Barb? I mean, we've got when you're looking at Social Security, what are some landmines people should be mindful of?
I think you have to understand the rules, and they're not easy to understand. I would say get a book. Mike Piper of Oblivious Investor has a really nice 100-page book on understanding Social Security. And I would recommend that book. And for those of you that have, a six-figure portfolio, I advise either speaking with a financial advisor for a 1 or 2 or 3 session meeting to try and get a handle on your personal situation. Because as the interview went, you're not going to get the advice you need from the Social Security Administration. So, number one, read up on what is out there. Mike Piper's book is good. There are other books. There are reputable articles. Look at reputable, responsible media sites. Investopedia is very good. Side note, I write for them, so I know they require very strong fact checking. And some of the major publications have really good articles on Social Security. So number one, educate yourself. And number two, think about talking with a professional, a financial planner, a financial advisor, to get some guidance on your personal situation.
Great. That's great. Phil, what about you?
The rules are complicated. It really helps, whether it's to read on your own or to talk to somebody that has a good understanding. If you do read it on your own, though, you still might want to talk to somebody just to confirm that what you found out was right. And I want to go back to one thing that you talked about, Kirk, on the administrative side. I will tell you that I have a client, this was their second marriage, and he retired in January. And because he retired, he's starting Social Security. Normally, I wouldn't recommend it, but they have a child that's under 18 and they can get a benefit for the child. until she turns 18. And so that kind of makes up for some of the other growth that he loses. And her benefit's going to be bigger than his anyway, even though there's a big age difference. But the other reason I'm bringing this up is I just told you he started Social Security as of February. First time he could get a meeting with somebody from the Social Security Administration, because they can't just start this. There's like things that you have to provide, is in mid to late April. So you have to wait. That doesn't mean you have to wait that long to get it, because they can go back and payment. But you can't just get a meeting right away. And there's a lot of other things going on right now too, because they changed the rules effective going back to 24 for some people around if you worked for if you were a teacher and you had a pension, a lot of times those people are not eligible for Social Security. That was the rules, and they changed that. And so now some of those people can get benefits. I have a couple clients that are impacted by this. They're able to get some back benefits. And then if they have a spousal benefit or divorce, whatever that may be, they can also get some of that. So there's a lot going on in terms of their time being occupied trying to deal with all those requests too. So there's a lot of time that's required to address all this stuff. But there's a lot of money spent on the administration. They don't have the answers. They're not the ones to ask, but you're also not going to be able to get in and speak to them right away. You have to be patient because there's just too many questions that people have about this process.
Yeah, no, I think that's important. So, how should we be thinking about this? Obviously, Social Security is something that a lot of people rely on for retirement income at a time when, they can no longer work or retire, which case your ability to earn has diminished significantly, if not been eliminated. So what else could people be thinking about if let's say they're like, oh my God, Social Security is going away. What am I ever going to do? I'm going to run out of money. What are some other ways people can think about income in retirement?
Well, the other thing to think about before retirement is it's prudent to save for retirement on your own as well, either in an IRA, a traditional or Roth, a 401k through work, if you're self-employed, a simple or a SEP IRA, which means that when you get to the retirement age, you will have additional income saved. So that's another thing. But if you didn't do that and you are dependent on your Social Security benefit to fund your life, I think you have to take a really hard look at a couple of things. Number one, where do you live? A lot of people don't like the idea of moving, but there are cheaper places to live in the United States. And that's a very real option if you are depending only on your Social Security. There is another thing that many, many, many seniors are doing, which is working part-time. It could be virtually. There's so many online jobs available. Use your skills that you had in your work life to do consulting or to do gig work. Fiverr is a website where freelancers of all stripes are matched up with people looking for workers. I can't tell you how many retirees I've run into uh, on Uber who are driving for Uber now. So you may think that you don't want to work, but many of us will have to work in retirement.
Okay. Phil, what about you? Any other ideas for how people can generate income in retirement?
The ones that Barb said, I think she did a pretty good job of capturing. I mean, there's a lot of things that I've read recently. There's articles talking about unretirement, right? This idea that we retire and then we realize we don't have enough and we do have to go back to work. It could be Uber drivers, like Barb said, consulting. There's lots of things. I mean, think of ways that you can use your experience. And also, if you're not yet retired and you don't really have a lot of money, you want to think about working longer. I know that doesn't sound great, but if you work longer, there's a couple things that happen. One is, assuming that your income goes up, that alone has a natural positive impact on your Social Security income because they take your 35 highest earnings years and the early years get indexed for inflation and they have some factors in there, but they take your 35 highest years to calculate your benefit. So if you're working and you're making more now than you have ever have before, you can replace some of those lower years or maybe replace zero earnings years with years where you do have income so that that can increase your benefit. Plus, from age 62 to age 70, the size of your benefit grows every year naturally because of what the Social Security Administration does, but also remember that every year we get some type of inflation adjustment to the benefit. And both those things factor in. So consider working longer. If you don't have the savings, so I know it doesn't sound great and we want to retire and we want to stop working, but you have to think realistically about how it is that you can have some type of quality of life. And if that means working a little bit longer, it can have other benefits. Maybe too, if you're doing that, you can start saving because even though the earlier you start, the better, it's never too late to start either. So it doesn't mean that you can't start to save. And you can think about what changes can I make to my lifestyle? Barb mentioned moving, right? That to a cheaper area. That's one idea. There's some other things. What expenses do you have that you don't need? It's not always just about generating income because there's two sides to that cash flow statement if we're thinking about it, right? It's what we take in and what we put out. And so if we can cut what's going out, that also has the impact of increasing the amount that we have left.
Yeah, those are great ideas. Actually, one that people don't talk about and is kind of scary for a lot of people is think of moving to another country. A lot of countries are much, much cheaper to live, and a lot of retirees move there because of lower costs, good climate, healthcare's different. I'll just say different. Some places they're better, some they're worse, but depending depending on what you believe from what's being said. But a lot of people consider that because I mean you could move to like South America or Central America. In some cases, it's much, much cheaper, and your dollars can go along much, much further. So, all right, well, let's kind of wrap it up here. So, final thoughts, Barb, and where can people find more about you?
One last tip for generating income. If you live in the United States, you've probably accumulated a lot of stuff. And as you get older, there are so many ways that you can sell what you have and generate income. In fact, some people even go thrifting and then resell what they buy on eBay to or other marketplaces, Poshmark, or, there's so many resale places that you can actually use that as a side hustle as well. So I am Barbara Friedberg. You can find me at Barbara Friedberg Personal Finance or on YouTube. See you next time.
Thanks, Barb. And Phil, final thoughts from you.
So one thing that we haven't talked a lot about that I'd like to also mention, I know that during the call, Beau mentioned the different levels at which Social Security income is taxed. You want to also be aware of two things that relates to taxes and costs of Social Security. One is something that I've written about called the Social Security tax torpedo. And so both talked about the idea that there's some levels there's no tax on Social Security. Sometimes there could be 50% tax, and sometimes there could be 85% tax. Well, if you do things with your income that move you from 0 to 50 or 50 to 85, that incremental income that moves you from one to the other becomes much more expensive because it makes more your, in addition to the income you're recognizing, you're making more of your Social Security benefit taxable. And then the other thing you want to keep in mind with Social Security and income in general is the idea that at certain levels with your income, your Medicare premiums, which are taken away from your Social Security benefits, will be increased based upon your income. So you also want to be careful about this is called IRMA, which is the income related monthly adjustment amount. You want to be careful about where your income falls because if you go over an IRMA income level by $1, you might as well go all the way up to the next one because $1 over increases your premium, and that's for every year, for every month of the year, for that whole year, not just one payment. And so it can have a big impact. So it's just something else to think about. Um, like I said, there's so many things that we could talk about in Social Security. If I really enjoyed listening to Beau talk about it, there's lots of tax planning, lots of things that we can do. So make sure that you're educated and you make good decisions because it can make a really big difference for you. As for me, my firm is Apprise Wealth Management. I know that experiencing big life transitions can be stressful. My job is to help empower women facing new beginnings with the financial knowledge and tools they need to make self-assured decisions. My firm's Apprise Wealth Management. We'd love to get to know you. You can go to our website, which is apprisewealth.com. That's APPRISE wealth.com to sign up for our weekly blog or to schedule a free introductory call. Thanks for having me on today, Kirk.
Yeah, thanks for coming on, Phil. Thanks, Barb. And thanks to Beau for the topic. It was a lot of fun talking about this. That's the show for this week. Thank you again for joining us on Money Tree Investing Podcast. My name's Kirk Chisholm, Wealth Manager of Innovative Advisor Group. We don't just manage your wealth, we make your life better. You can find more about me at innovativewealth.com. And of course, you can find me every week here on this show. You can also check out our show at Money Tree Investing Podcast. On our website, you'll have access to the show notes, resources, and the archive shows. Please remember to subscribe on our YouTube channel for immediate access to the new shows when they're released. When you subscribe to the show, it allows us to get access to some of the top minds of investing in personal finance. While you're here, please leave a comment and question if you want us to address it on the show. Have a great week ahead, and remember, no one will care about your money like you do, so invest in your life.